We have many celebrations throughout the year, remembering Mary and her yes to God. This is one of the celebrations which the East and the West Church celebrate on the same day, that Mary was assumed both body and soul into heaven. Fathers of the Church expressed their belief as early as 170 A.D., and the feast began to be celebrated around the year 450. Pope Pius XII defined the doctrine as the infallible teaching of the Assumption of Mary on November 1st, 1950, which of course is All Saints' Day. In his encyclical, he cited Mary's connection with her son, the new Adam, and his victory over sin and death. We believe that when Mary's earthly life was finished, she was taken up, body and soul, into heavenly glory, where the Lord exalted her as Queen of Heaven. And we can also find that quote in the Catechism. From the beginning to the end of her life, Mary's life was one of faith and prayer. Why do we believe that Mary's assumption into heaven, despite the fact that it's not referred to in the Bible? There was no direct reference of Mary's death and assumption in the New Testament. It's mentioned kind of in the Old Testament when we look at Enoch and Elijah, who also were taken, and Elijah especially was taken up in the fiery chariot and assumed into heaven. The fact of Mary's death is generally accepted by the church fathers and theologians. They say that Mary's death was not a punishment for sin, but only the result of her being a descendant of Adam and Eve. When Pope Pius XII made the proclamation, he put into words the belief held by the faithful for 1,500 years. Even at the Council of Nicaea in 325, which they made the creed, also speaks of the Assumption of Mary. Pope Pius XII based his declaration of the Ascension on both tradition and theology. The tradition of the Eastern Church from the first century supporting the popular belief of the Assumption of Mary. As we listen to our first reading, it was from the book of Revelation, seeing Mary as a woman clothed with a sun, with crown of 12 stars, and with the moon under her feet. And as we look at the picture of Mary, as we have Our Lady of Guadalupe, we can see that image right there. In our second reading from Paul proclaimed that all of us will rise from the dead and will have the glory of Christ on the last day. And in the gospel, we hear that Magnificat, nothing will be impossible with God, as she went to visit her cousin Elizabeth. And she named Mary blessed among women, and as the mother of my Lord. Mary responded with that beautiful canticle of the Magnificat of Mary that's said every day in the evening prayer. The Assumption of Mary celebrates the mercy of God. Mary, known as a symbol of the church, the new Ark of the Covenant. Since she carried Jesus, we're reminded we also carry Jesus in our hearts as we receive him in the Holy Eucharist at every Mass. The fathers of the church developed the concept between Eve and Mary. Eve sinning and brought about death and suffering, Mary obeying with her yes and bringing about life and glory. The motto of what we should all strive for in saying our yes to God and no to sin. Our life of faith, too, must be sustained in prayer, both personal and communal prayer. Our participation in the Mass expresses our nourishment of our faith. Making time in our day for personal prayer, too, enables us to appreciate all that God has given us and a deeper communion with him. If we follow Mary's example, a routine of prayer, a habit of praise, and a total submission to God's will, we too someday will join Mary in our heavenly award in heaven.